Welcome to Tech Alley. I'm RJ, and I'll be your tech ally for the next few minutes. Just answering your questions and a little bit of philosophy on technology and people and how we get along. Okay. This is March 30th. Happy Saturday. It's my intention to publish an episode weekly, and so this will be episode 5. Today, I got some questions that are relatively interesting, but in this case, I want to just focus on one particular question, which is, RJ, why do you do this? And that's probably a good question to answer for the reasons that, who am I and what does it matter what I think? That's a pretty good idea to start with. It gives me all kinds of anxiety, but let me just try to tell you how things got started between me and this technology game. When I was really still a baby, I visited the college campus where my mother was going to school. Happy birthday, Mom, by the way. And in that basement was a card reading and punch card creating machine that would allow her to complete her coursework for what I guess was maybe a data management course. In any case, it seemed like at that time this was a very cool place for a very young RJ to stare at this equipment with lots of noise and interesting pieces of cardstock flying around and the resulting IBM cards that we used in the day for programming and data entry. So these kinds of rooms had already been kind of tantalizing and very much drew my attention at might have been 5 or 6 years old at that point. And then time passed. I was given a little bit of exposure to video games in the arcade and at the bowling alley, as probably a lot of people remember Pac-Man and Donkey Kong, and I think I remember Galaga. That was one that we all loved, and pinball, of course, was there. So the video games that I saw were hands down the coolest, and I felt like this was going to be a very lucrative business to be in. And I saw the guys collecting quarters to put in the machines, and I knew even at that young age what a quarter meant. It was at least a seltzer water at the bowling alley. So let's just say that when the time came and my dad asked me if I wanted to go in with him to work, I said, heck yeah. And I saw the Digital Equipment Corporation mini computer assembly unit in Enfield, Connecticut, up close and personal. And the very first time I ever saw what would eventually become known as email or messaging. So this was also straight up into my eyeball. I knew this was what was coming. And it wasn't much longer after that the very first real, I would say microcomputer landed in my proximity. So I started programming BASIC on a TRS-80 color computer Model 1 at 8 years old, 7 or 8. So that was like a very early days version of my mother's idea of a video game console. It was not an Atari 2600, which was what I really wanted to play. She said, no, you'll have to learn how to program before you can play. And at the time, I was not thrilled about that, but I should be thanking her for that now, because let's see, that was 79 or 80, I was starting to become the RJ that I am today. So that was the earliest times. It wasn't that long before digital had to shut down their mini computer operation because microcomputers, and there are still some operating out there, so maybe it's worthwhile to have an administrator certificate for a mainframe for those rare occasions. But this is my pursuit for a number of years after that into grade school and into high school. I was always the demonstrator of the technology, whether it was a Apple II running a drafting machine and a plotter, or just being able to poke a Commodore 64 just so, and cause it to make pretty colors and keep everybody's attention in the classrooms while we were collectively bored out of our minds in class. So that was kind of my schooling on computers. After about, let's say, in 1981 or two, I just started pursuing the discovery on my own, and there was no way that schools at that time could have predicted that there would be a need for students to have an education in this background in computer technology and communications. And it was in the 80s too that the computer technologies were starting to break through the walls that were keeping computers kind of isolated from each other. And we might refer to Steve Jobs and Wozniak as freaks at the time, with a PH, freak, because of their interest in hacking the phone technology that was available in most everybody's house by that point. And so the freak technology was well documented, and in the 80s I was a thirsty young brain sponge, and I absorbed all that I could about telnet and being able to communicate over a telephone line with your 1200 baud modem and be at a real-time text chat with somebody across the country or even internationally. It depends on your phone bill or thereabouts. So in that way, I was, very much by 10th grade, a qualified freak, and that freaking was going to give way to the hacking or the technology around hacking using Wargames dialers in high school. I had the cops called to the house one time, and they didn't know anything about what a Wargames dialer was or why the phone would be busy for more than 24 hours, but they were curious when their phone rang and it was hung up on right away and never to be heard from again. When all callbacks were busy, send a deputy to see what's going on at this house. It was very surprising to be woken up at midnight and to find out that, in fact, the deputies were wondering when my phone was going to stop being busy. Yeah, 10th grade. That was also the year that I stopped going to school altogether. So in Florida, if you get a GED, it's equivalent. It stands as the same as a regular high school diploma. So I had to wait until I turned 16, but from there, I was biding my time getting a mainframe operator certificate at the trade school. And from there, they hired me to use a presentation software called IBM Storyboard. You can look that up, it's very old, but I was very happy to use software and get paid to perform these same loving, caring jobs that I did as a kid for now as a job. And I knew, again, at 15 that there was going to be some business in this, and it was happening all around. That was roughly 1987. And so I would give that part of my life the credit for having an unending thirst to absorb this stuff and to say that my brain was melted and reformed into the hierarchical structure of a digital storage unit. That's not too far off. I realized that there was an efficiency to how data was stored on these machines, and my brain is now capable of doing the recall with some integrity of the stuff that was stored there even all that time ago. And I learned in those days about how the other children in my age group and others that were older would be getting in trouble for trespassing into areas, digital domains that were not authorized. So I kind of shied away from being a breaker of the secret bond that people have around their information. I think that at that moment I was interested in helping people learn how to keep their stuff private. Even though, and this is maybe this is part 2 of the conversation we can come back to at some point, even though at the time, the internet, or the very young internet at the time, was not aware that privacy was going to be a thing. While, very early days, CompuServe and some online services like Prodigy were starting out, maybe they gave thought to the information that they were sharing or the information that people had access to. But privacy, that wasn't part of the specification for the build by the internet builders. That would be DARPA and the Usenet, because it's time, BitNet, the other kinds of networks that became the internet would ultimately regard privacy as an interference with logging and debugging. The throughput of data and the quality assurances meant that every attempt was given to check and recheck and have multiple sources of pathways to share information in case some of those pathways had been corrupted or disconnected along the way. So in a dynamic way, the internet was not intended to secure any privacy at all. And it was more like I was at that age, just absorbing and remembering and memorizing everything that comes in front of it. And having grown up alongside it and having made a living using it, I would tell anybody that's interested in privacy on the internet right now that the chances are slim that your privacy will be protected for long. No matter who promises that they can do that, it's really an antithesis to the design of the internet. And so the people who know that will keep that quiet for now, as long as there's an incentive. And the incentive is to get you, the customer, in this case, to buy privacy, or to buy the feeling of privacy. So that's about all I have time for. And this has been a great share. Thank you for everything, to come and listen to me talk about the old days. And I really feel like an old timer now, but maybe next opportunity I can talk about my early days working for this tiny little West Coast company out of California, Apple. Anyway, thank you again. Visit my website for more information, or to get involved with the services that I provide as far as your business at home, or your individual projects as a musician or an artist. I understand budgets. I understand that we can't all afford to have an IT department in-house, but my business, Seabreeze, has always been that, to provide an IT service as good as any you can find in the halls of business for your home on demand. And just as if you had a basement full of nerds. Until next time, thank you again, and happy birthday again, Mom. All right. Sound check, audio check. I'm talking, I'm contemplating. Okay, this is another check. This is another check. Let's see how that works. Are you better? Wow, that's great. I'm staring at the sun. PSA.